Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. This video is going to be the second play report in the Midnight Sun game that I am running in ShadowDark. ShadowDark, of course, is that dark fantasy tabletop role-playing game written by Kelsey Dion and published through her company, the Arcane Library. Now, I forgot to give that attribution in the last video that I made, and my apologies to everybody involved, but here we are. I'm giving it now, so hopefully all is forgiven. So if you recall, I decided to start this game when the crew that I'm running through the gloaming for the Curse Scrolls #1 couldn't make it one day, and so we decided to do a little bit of a one-shot and start the adventure in Curse Scroll 3, which is Midnight Sun. And I thought it would just go one night, but it was pretty popular. So now it seems like I'm going to be juggling both campaigns, and this will pick up where we left last time. So why don't we give a little bit of an update of where we were? And in order to do that, I am going to make my way over to the Foundry page. Let me see if I can make a clean transition this time. There we go. So here we are on the Foundry page for the Midnight Sun campaign. And over here, where I'm going to kind of like box them in a circle, you have the 4 original characters that played in the original session. And then we have 2 new characters that joined us this time around. Okay. So let me reintroduce you to the 4 main characters, or the 4 initial characters, I should say. So first we had Astrid the Seer, who is a human, specifically a Nord, which means that she comes from the Viking-inspired culture that Midnight Sun is catered to. And Astrid is, like I said, she's a seer. She's the daughter of a seer and an apprentice to a seer. We also have Floki, our god-touched sea wolf, right? Played by my friend Dan. We have my friend Alex's character, Milel, who is a half-elf wizard. And he is not a Nord. He comes from a distant land, but has taken an interest in the Nords and is traveling along with them. And then we have Seovald, our second sea wolf, played by my friend Mike. And Seovald is the son of a Jarl. So we left those 4 characters at a Nord settlement just south of the region map that you see on the screen right now. And that region is the Isles of Andric, but we figure in our campaign that the Nord lands extend beyond the Isles of Andric. And so we'd left our characters at a village that is not on this map, just south of this map. The way they got there is that they had been tossed at sea by a storm, had lost many of their crew and many of their stores, and in that state they had tried to raid a monastery, had limited success, managed to escape, managed to forage for food to make the trip to the village, the aforementioned village, and they had a night of carousing there, and that's where we ended the first session. So here we're picking up right in the midst of that carousing. And one of the things that I said was that during that carousing, they met 2 friends that they thought that they had left at sea or lost at sea. And those are the new characters. Carl Valto, who is also a Nord, but a Nord who has a wide-ranging experience. He is I forget what his background is, but it's something like far traveler, and he is a thief by class, played by my friend Jason. And then we have my friend Adolfo's character Lenar, who again is also a Nord, and he is a ranger by class. So both of those guys were people who they thought had been lost at sea, but now they found them here in this village. We'll figure out their story of how they got to the village at some other point perhaps. But it was enough to say that they all kind of gathered during that day of carousing, embraced each other, said, "So glad to see you alive," and that Carl Valto and Lenar joined the original crew. So now we have 6 people on this dragon boat. The other thing that I said happened during their carousing was that they specifically Millel and Astrid, had seen a shield maiden walking around, asking questions about the region. She was followed by some henchmen. She had kind of a retinue with them. One of them was a graybeard that was hanging out with her. The other one was a strapping, muscular guy with red hair. And she was asking how to get to a specific place where it was rumored that the legendary king of the Nords, and let me make sure that I get his name right, the legendary king of the Nords, King Skorgald, who had been around many generations ago. She wanted to know where he had been laid to rest. And then Astrid and Millel overheard her in discussion with her henchmen, not spreading this news around, but in discussion with her henchmen, she revealed, or they were able to figure out, that she considered herself to be the last surviving ancestor of the king, and that she wanted to go to his tomb to lay her hand on the nine-eyed axe that she would be able to use as a symbol of power to kind of lay claim to the kingship of all the Nords, or the queenship of all the Nords. Right. So Gargotha, I think her name is, that shield maiden, had made the rounds and left the village ahead of the party being able to do anything, because Seovald, in his carousing, had been in the stocks for 4 days, and so they couldn't leave without him. So they had to wait. But when Seovald, was released from the stocks and they got together and discussed, it was actually interesting. It was Millel who was like, "Isn't that fascinating? An ancient tomb with who knows what treasure and what lore and what magic. Maybe it would be interesting to go over there." Now, he's kind of an outsider saying these things, but nevertheless, the others were not opposed to the idea, and they were thinking, do we want this Gargotha person who came, by the way, from those extended Nordlands that I said? So she wasn't as familiar with the Isles of Andric as the player characters were, who actually come from here. But they're like, do we want somebody like her to lay claim to a title like that? And besides, we know where the king is rumored to be buried, but nobody ever really thought to go there. Right? It was kind of like taboo, or it's just kind of like the place where, you pay it respect when you're sailing by, but you don't go and violate it. But here you have somebody who's going in there with a purpose, and that seemed to break the taboo in their minds a little bit. And so they were like, maybe we should go in there. Maybe we should see, it's fair game to plunder this, and certainly to prevent somebody from claiming greater power over all our individual villages and all that. So bottom line is that they decided that they would go to the site and see if they could find something for themselves. Now, I want to mention an outlier here, and that is Carl Valto, our thief, who you'd think would be interested in the treasures, but he likes to come by his treasure with less danger involved, right? He likes easier marks that are more assured to allow him to walk away wealthy and also in shape to enjoy the wealth, right? So he was hesitant, but he was kind of outvoted. He wasn't going to not go on the dragon boat. So they all set off towards the part of the spot on the map that I'm going to ping right now, which is where the cliff face where the cliff face is, where we have a series of sea caves that are rumored to be where the king's body was laid to rest oh so long ago. They managed to pick up some rumors about the king, and one of the things that they knew was that the king had a friendship with the Dverg, right, which are the region's version of dwarves, and that he liked their craftiness, and through his alliance with them, they could expect that the place that they were going to would be a tricky place, maybe one with many secret doors or dangerous traps or other things that might throw them for a loop. So they set off. I rolled for, random encounters along the way. They got lucky and saw nothing. And so we then end up in a kind of cove with this cliff face above them and two caves visible for them to consider. So, before we talk about them considering these two caves, let me say that when I put Gargotha's quest in front of them, I wasn't certain that they were going to bite. In fact, Caravalto's suggestion that it might be too dangerous was a fair one. And I, again, just like it was with the monastery during the first session, which I thought, well, maybe they'll read it, maybe they won't. I was ready to just turn to the excellent sort of setting that Kelsey worked up in Midnight Sun, right? I could have just simply rolled random encounter checks until they got to their village. When they got to their village, we could have had something going on with the political situations in the various villages. And, adventure would have happened anyway. But, it was fair, I think, to put this, this adventure hook in here to see if they bite, and they bit. So here they were sitting in front of these two caves and trying to consider which one to go in. Valto is still giving his admonitions, like, I don't know, this looks dangerous. And Astrid was like, no, the gods are with us. And she went to cast one of her spells, which would, I don't know if it would have bestowed them with a luck token, somebody with a luck token, or what have you. But Astrid went to invoke the gods, and it was interesting because she rolled a 1 on the die. And when you roll a 1 on the die, you have to do penance if you're a seer. And that meant that she was going to lose 1d4 hit points, which she wouldn't be able to regain until, I think it's a full rest or something like that. So right there, instead of receiving Freya's insight or blessing, she was harmed by her attempt. And Valto was like, see, this is an indication that this is a bad idea. If this is not a bad omen, I don't know what is. And the rest of the characters are like, yeah, you're right. It is a bad omen. It is a bad omen. So instead of going in that cave, which is where we were about to go, we're going to go in that cave, right? So they just switched which cave they were going to go into based on that. I thought that was kind of a funny moment. Valto just kind of shrugged his shoulders and went on. And, they all went on. So let me jump to talking about what happened when they went into this cave. And I really love the way that this adventure is written because the caves are tall enough so that the dragon boats can actually navigate in, and they're wide enough so that the dragon boats can navigate in, right? So for the first section of this adventure, the characters are able to do the dungeon crawl on their dragon boat. And of course, it's pitch black in there, as it always is in ShadowDark in dungeon environments, right? So they set it up so they would have a lantern up front, and they covered the sides of the lantern so the lantern was just projecting light forward. And the only people who could see, therefore, were Carl Valto, who was kind of standing up next to the prow of the dragon ship, and Seovald, who was sitting up front doing the rowing with, I forget who was doing the rowing next to him. And Floki was sort of in back, steering the ship, right? So everybody else kind of huddled in the ship and everybody was quiet, right? And as they navigated in, Carl Valto first could see that on the shores there was a kind of like a cavern to his left where there was a rocky shore, and mixed in to the rocks was gold, glittering gold, and also bones, right? And he could hear a deep snoring in there. So, he called back for everybody to be quiet. And they were all deathly quiet. It was funny because you could see the players' faces grimace when I said that there was a snoring, a deep snore going on there. They're like, no, we're not interested in this gold that's littering the shore here. Let's just keep moving. So they very gently kind of rowed their way through this. And as they were kind of rounding around that shore, they could see that there was another kind of a cavern where they could disembark and go north. And they could hear this intermittent, there you go, buzzing in there as well. So they kind of shook their heads at that and like, no, 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 no. So kept going through, and then the cavern got very, very narrow. So they were almost having to like pull the boat along or pull the boat along by the walls and stuff as they kind of like navigated the boat down this narrow tunnel. Um, and they came out eventually into this kind of wider area that had options, right? And one of the options was to continue to go north. Well, sorry, one of the options was to go north, and the other option was to kind of continue going west. So they reasoned that the westerly direction might reconnect with the other cave. They weren't sure, but they guessed that was the case. So they weren't interested in doing that. So they decided to go north. And when they went north, they went into this large cavern that was way too large for the lantern. Even when they took off the kind of the hood around it, and it illuminated this large area, and it was to the east, it was too distant for the light to show the walls of the cavern or anything like that. But to the west, to the north and the northwest, they saw a natural cavern with another kind of beach area where this kind of interior lake kind of came up across. And they started kind of heading in that direction. And then they could see that there was this kind of like worked stone that kind of jutted out from the natural cavern into the lake region. And they could see that if they landed on the beach, if they disembarked on the beach, that there was an entrance into the chamber of worked stone that they could see. And so they were heading in that direction, and as they got close, they noticed that there was a blue-skinned humanoid that was lying on the beach, like half in, half out of the water, with like a black seaweed kind of like covering much of their body and all of that. And they're like, oh, what happened here? And so they started to disembark to go there. And at that point, Lennar, our ranger, like stood up and like drew his dagger. And the other but was like, what are you doing? And he's like testing, and he threw the dagger at the body lying on the beach. And they were about to start chiding him for being overly cautious or paranoid or whatever. But they were surprised when the figure kind of arched their back and revealed herself to be like a sea elf, a nymph essentially, right? An oceanic elf, but she looked kind of gaunt and undead, right? And we rolled initiative, and I don't know if somebody got a shot at her. I think Astrid might have gotten to throw her dagger at her and miss or what have you, but she dove, or maybe hit actually. I think she did take 2 blows before she then dove into the water, and then there was this silence, right? And everybody was just standing on the boat, like listening. And then suddenly she came up in front of Seabald and tried to grab him and pull him underwater, but they made quick work of her, right? So that happened. So at that point, people disembarked and they started heading towards the opening where that worked stone was. And I think it was Valto who walked in first. I think Millel also walked over there. Millel tried to cast Detect Magic, and he rolled a 1 on his casting spell too, and he got a magic worm essentially that started destroying his other spells. So he was basically left just imagine a wizard without spells, right? Just a dude essentially. And here we had Astrid with 1 hit point, right? Because she had failed that roll. So the spellcasters had taken some real serious damage here. So again, bad omens abounded, but they decided to press on anyway. So Valto, I think it was, went into that big chamber first, and going in, he could see that there was a large dragon boat, black, beautifully made, up on kind of struts, just sitting in the middle of this chamber, in grand style. And they all just walked in and kind of like took it in wondering what it was doing here, wondering if it was meant to be launched out into the lake. But I basically described that no, it looked like it has been set up here, um, you know, as as kind of a some sort of ornamentation, or that it was just meant to be sitting in the middle of this chamber. And when Valto went up into the boat, right, he noticed that there was laid out in a funerary position, right, was a body with like a linen over it. And I think it was Astrid who went up and pulled the linen off, and they saw this kind of regal looking woman, desiccated woman with long white hair, just lying there in rest. And she was holding, and I'm sitting here looking it up because I forget what she was holding. She was holding something. You know what? I'm not gonna. Here it is, I think. Yes. She was holding a golden shod staff in one hand and had rings, on the other hand, one pearl, one crystal, one ruby chip on each finger. And I think it was Astrid who took the staff. And Valto went up and took, um, all the surreptitiously, kind of like went and took all of the rings off the fingers. Now there was an increasing chance, as written in the adventure, of with each ring coming off, there was a chance that a ghost would be summoned. And with the very last ring that came off of her finger, the body started to tremble, and there was a wind that came out of the body, and a ghost of the woman rose up, hovering over them, and this kind of like majesty, this her hair kind of standing up, and she was kind of like coming out of reverie. And I was about to roll the reaction roll to see how she was going to respond to them when Millel said that he was going to try to interact with her. And he basically got before her and said, "We mean you no harm. We are what is it that keeps you from your rest, and all this stuff." And he has a charisma bonus, so I decided to roll reaction as I'm supposed to, and added his charisma bonus, and it came out friendly. Rolled really well. I think it was like a 14 total on the roll. And so I decided that the lady had some prior connection, and a very fond connection, with the people of Alfheim, and that saw a kindred, recognized a kindred being in Millel, and that association put her in a softer stance, and that she was very willing to treat with him because of that. And she actually kind of hovered over to him and like kind of tried to caress his face as she was talking to him and stuff, and then he was talking to her. And again, he reiterated, "What is it that keeps you from your rest?" And she said, "This is not a place of glory. This is not a place of honor. This is a place of betrayal. And, there's great shame that is here." And Millel was like, "Well, how can we rectify that?" And she's like, I am not the one to ask. Ask my lord, and he will tell you if it's at all possible to um, right the wrongs that were done. Only then maybe will I gain my rest, or we will gain our rest, or something like that. And with that, she kind of, with longing eyes looking at Millel, she kind of like dissipated and kind of like went off to wherever the dead go when they're in between places. And with that, the party decided, they had had a long journey here. Their wizards were weakened. I think somebody may have taken a hit from the nymph too. I don't remember, when they fought her briefly. And so they decided that they would actually camp out here. They set watches and all of that to try to get a rest before they pushed on. And I already rolled the random encounter rolls, the wandering monster rolls, while they were resting, and they got lucky. Nothing showed up. So that's where we decided to end this session. It was a short session, relatively speaking. It was late and we were tired, but everybody had a lot of fun, I think. I know I had a lot of fun. And again, I couldn't speak more highly of these Curse Scrolls. I'm looking forward to Curse Scroll number 4 to come out sometime in the hopefully near future. I still have my Curse Scroll number 2, the Red Sands, that I haven't touched yet. But these are written in such a nice way. There's just so much adventure to be had, and really, for me, the best prep for these is just to take an afternoon and read through the keyed region map and all the little different situations that are peppered throughout, and then let players make characters. And as they're making characters, just start your wheels turning as to how they might hook into any of the different situations that are already laid out for you. And if nothing immediately jumps out in terms of a connection, you'll at least have a sense of where you can start them off. And then all of the random encounter tables and the rumor tables and all of that, it's very easy to get a game going in this. So that's 2 sessions of Midnight Sun. I figure we've got at the very, very least, a third session in us. It might take us maybe 2 or 3 more sessions to finish the dungeon crawl, depending on whether or not they decide to do the whole thing. And then after that, we'll see. I'm kind of juggling Midnight Sun with the Gloaming, right, from Curse Scroll number 1. So between the two of those, we'll have a lot of ShadowDark to do in the coming days. So thank you so much for hanging out and listening to, how this adventure sort of rolled out. And as always, I wish you good health. I wish you good cheer, and I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.